is being turned on now. So thank you so much for that. You'll see that we have quite a tight agenda here. I'm not going to spend much time with you at all, just really kind of setting the scene for you, because really the annual general meeting is really about the Leadership Council and the working groups and the board and what it has been doing over the past year and its plans for the future. So those are the primary parts of our it's certainly in terms of format and content and so on for the past year and year going forwards. But it's particularly pleasurable to talk about the Kantara Exemplary Contributor Award because we have some awards to give out this year. It's the first year that we've done this, and so we're looking forward to that. And hopefully some of those people may be online. Some possibly don't even know that they've been awarded yet. So for particularly great contributions. So you can see from the agenda here, myself, then led by Andrew and the other working group chairs that formulate the Leadership Council. Then we'll do the awards to those exemplary contributors. And then we'll hand over to Matt Thompson, Kantara's president, and he's going to work through some of the work that the board has been setting up for your comment and review. And then we'll open the floor to discussion while we're also managing the chat along the way. So with that, I want to just move to the next slide, if I could please, Andrew. And the one after that. Thanks. So I've got a series of just a few slides here just to remind you, get you really into the context of where we're at. So if you're putting Kantara on a page, it would look very much like this. You're going to see the mission there, and primarily some of the things that we do with the only industry consortium with identity and personal data and so on. We run a commons type environment, certainly with the community side of the working groups and so on. And of course, this organisation whose AGM we're at is only one of 3 Kantara branded organisations that we have. The other one is in Europe, Kantara Europe, and the Educational Foundation, also a US-based non-profit public good charity. On our board, we're showing the board members there, but it's useful to appreciate that the Internet Society and ForgeRock are stepping off the board in 2021. So we're very appreciative seeing that we already have some nominations coming in for directors at large, and that's great. If you're interested in becoming a director on Kantara's board, then I understand the directors at large's proposals open till 2021. Till December the 7th for 2021 board seats. Next slide, please. So just reminding us of our membership, and it's worldwide. You'll see governments, private sector organisations from many different industry sectors, but all sharing digital identity and personal data as a part of what they do. So that's very it's a great way of bringing us together. And we've had some notable large memberships coming through the later part of the year. So that's great. Next slide, please. Okay, just a brief recollection on what the organisational structure is for Kantara, this particular part of the organisation, the 501c6 here. So basically, remember that Kantara is bicameral, which means that the Leadership Council is fundamentally autonomous. It's accountable to the board, but it doesn't effectively report to the board. The program side does have a reporting line to the board, at least in its current structure. The structure is under review, let me say. But you'll see the working groups down the side there and some of the other monetised sides of the organisation to the left. Next slide, please, Andrew. Here we are, just remembering what most people around the world remember us for, the trust framework that we operate. And that is certainly used by the US federal government for compliance with NIST 863.3. It's the thing that we're most known for. Remember that we also have the Gakinen scheme, obviously, in Japan as well, and some other things on the go. UMA, user managed access, great to have some UMA working group folks and the chair and vice chair on this call. Consent receipt, we were the first folks out with that. Thank you to the Consent and Information Sharing Work Group for that work, and it's also now in ISO. So if people think of Kantara, they usually think of these three things. Next slide, please. And really the 2020 highlights here. Well, we're inching on 100 members now, with our individual members, corporate members, and our liaisons brought together. And that's a slight increase over 2019. We are expecting that to go up again, with probably a slight leaning towards corporate members throughout 2021. So that's interesting. Our revenues and expenses are quite similar to that they were in 2019. So we're broadly running around just under 4 months of reserves. We would like that to be closer to 6 months. So it's reasonable, if not spectacular. But given what we do, we're not a hard out pay to play membership organisation like basically everybody else in this industry. Very much so, or very strong support for those that aren't. Very, very strong support from large corporates to do that otherwise. So given our mission, vision, and the community basis on which we run, we do pretty well for what we are. But we certainly could do with certainly a little more funds. So think about that when you do your membership renewal, please. Thank you. So the things on our highlights here. Certainly we've had a significant increase in interest for the assessment assurance and grant trustmark, our assurance program. The trust framework is what you hear all around the world these days in many respects. Interestingly, a lot of that talk is actually about some of the new ones, but not some of the existing ones like T-Scheme and Kantara, but they're very well vested and established in what they do. Extremely high reputation globally for what they do, and that has certainly held us in good stead. Publications, which are broadly speaking brought out from the work groups, and I've just given some list of some of them there. So that's really a doubling of what we had during 2019. So it's quite interesting to see a number of publications. And this is, I give great credit to LC Leeds for driving that through the working groups. It's great to see. Of course, we've started a new discussion group, MDL, mobile driving license, and particularly the privacy and identity parts of that. And thank you, John Wunderlich, for stepping up to lead that. And very, very interesting discussions. And a wide variety of stakeholders there, both government and private sector. It's good to see. Doubling also of interest in terms of invitations to comment on particular schemes and standards around the world. And we've had that, I think, that is led and coordinated by the Identity Assurance Work Group, and Ken Dagg may talk to that later on. Certainly, the board has been very busy over the summer, particularly with the movement of the presidency from ForgeRock to IDEMIA, and you'll hear from Matt about the board's work over the summer in terms of its review and where we're going in certainly our direction, ever closer to standards alignment with ISO. And with that, next slide, and then we are onwards. Okay, so this last slide of mine talks specifically about the new priorities coming up, and you're going to hear much more about that from Matt Thompson a little later on. The ever closer alignment to ISO standards. You said this is something that we're going to be working on in 2021. We certainly have been working on it for about 1.5 years now. A little bit more to go before we're able to be public with that, but it's certainly looking good. You'll see, because of some of the strategic changes that we're making and further ISO alignment, that we are going to require some bylaws changes. And if I mentioned that there's going to be really no voting necessary, particularly in this AGM, but we will be looking for all member ballots quite early in 2021, Q1, Q2, to work through some of these structural changes that we need to make to enable the organisation to deliver on its proposed new mission and vision. Just a smaller thing, but the world map view of membership rather than the list view that we currently have, and you'll have seen a couple of messages about that, and we'll continue working with that so that folks can actually see where just the sheer scale and breadth of Kantara's members around the world. And finally, as I mentioned at the top, the directors at large, and will you be a Kantara director in 2021, reminding you that nominations close next week. Next slide, and I think that's it for me, Andrew. It is, and over to you, Andrew, and to the working group chairs. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Colin. That's a great introduction to Kantara as a whole, and some great accomplishments from all sides of Kantara. So Leadership Council chairs, we're getting close to the time where you'll turn on your microphones to give your highlights for the year. I've got a couple of slides to set the stage, and then it's your time to shine and see what incredible stuff you've been up to this year. Again, just a level set. So one of the things that we've noticed quite distinctly with Kantara on the community group side of the house is that most people interact with one work group or discussion group, and they have no idea that Kantara does a whole bunch of stuff. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of all the things that the Kantara working groups and discussion groups do and the relative role within the organization. Then we'll hear from each of the work groups on what they've achieved in 2020. So the way I represent Leadership Council is that we set the work program for the community groups. We handle new charters for new work groups. We oversee various aspects of the groups and the execution. And we're really here to be a communication vessel between the community groups and the board as a formal channel, and between the community groups from time to time as we go through the meetings. Okay. But what do we actually do? So just put together a quick slide of some of the things we get up to. Really and truly, what the Kantara groups do is we provide a space for collaboration and an easy way to publish, right? We're directed towards international expert networks and standards bodies. We have liaison agreements with several standards bodies so we can get work published in your area of interest in identity data and personal data and assurance, all those aspects. And we can direct them towards international groups. For example, with the mobile driver's license, we're seeing that the ISO 18013-5, Part 5 standard is being published. Our work will support and help implement that standard. We do work with the ISO community with various identity assurance standards. We do with USO&C, as our Health Information Assurance Work Group will point out, helping guide the policy, bringing a forum for international experts, that's you on the call, to collaborate, publish, and be a reputable platform to advance the industry overall. We have a set of groups that are active and a set of groups that we prune the groups as they fulfill their purpose, or perhaps the interest has shifted over time. And you can see on the list that we've got some active work groups and discussion groups for 2020. We've retired a few whose purpose has been completed and done some rearranging. Recently in November, Jim Pasquale and Sal D'Agostino were re-elected along with myself for leadership team for Leadership Council as chair, vice chair, and secretary. It's a one-year term, and it's open to any participant on the Leadership Council. Once again, it's to set the work program for the community groups and sort of do some gentle nudging of the chairs as the chairs are on the call have noticed. So if you haven't explored what Kantara groups do, go to the main site and look under the groups. You can see it there. Okay, chairs, we're going to go through in a possibly random order of these slides that we prepared.
That's it.
So try to keep it light. A couple of minutes would be great. Remembering that everyone's going to get a copy of the slides and have access to them after the fact. So Ken or Martin, not sure who's taking it, but over to you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ken Degg. I'm chair of the Identity Assurance Working Group, and my co-chair is Martin Smith, who's also on this call. Our purpose, as you can see on the slide, is we maintain and act as the steward of the methods and mechanisms of the Identity Assurance Framework. This year, we did two primary things. One is we updated and involved some of the IAF documents. They hadn't been updated for several years. Just refreshed them. But our biggest accomplishment, I think, is responding, as Colin was mentioning, to calls for comments from various jurisdictions. And I've listed the majority of the ones that we did this year. And there's more of them on the horizon for next year. So we'll be doing that next year. What's interesting is looking across the various reviews that we were asked to perform. They're all very technically oriented. And in that technical orientation, they focus for the most part on information security and interoperability, with a few of them having a mention of privacy. Some more than others, but for the most part, it's a minor mention. The one that stands out for me with respect to privacy is the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, led by the Digital Identification and Authentication Council of Canada. But almost all of them, again, with the exception of NIAC's Pan-Canadian Trust Framework, are very light on their certification and approval process. And that's the process by which a member of a federation can be assured that another member that they want to interact with meets all the requirements that they have for that membership in that federation, and that they can trust that when they send them stuff, it's actually going to get there, and that the stuff they get over the internet is actually from who it says it's from. So that is an interesting finding, primarily because that's one of Kantara's big strengths. As I said earlier, we're going to prepare more responses for comments in the new year, next year, and update some other IAF documents as we go through. So I'll look forward to any questions you might have at the end of the session, during the Q&A session. So back to you, Andrew, for the next group.
Great, thanks very much, Ken. Excellent. So Jim Pasquale, you're up for ISI. So go ahead. So you've got two slides, so off we go.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, everyone, for your time this afternoon. My name is Jim Pasquale, and like all of the other exciting things that have happened in 2020, one of them, which I consider an anomaly inside Kantara, is the Information Sharing Interoperability Work Group. And the reason being is that we are focused very much on baked-in information sharing around privacy. And so we're a little different than other work groups in the fact that we have several project teams that have emerged from the former Consent Information Sharing Project, which had an outstanding response in the ability to create a receipt to offer individuals as a way of memorializing, in effect, the information that a company requested and then was shared. And the overall goal now is this new framework called a personal data use receipt. And one of the reasons specifically why we decided to break into a variety of projects in order to do this is because of the vast amount of ways individuals are on a regular basis being able to control and share information, and at the same time companies becoming more respectful around not just asking for information, whether it's through consent or permission or authorization, but then garnering that information in a way that it is protected based on the individual's desires to be able to do that. So what does that really mean? So the framework is now broken out into a project around intent casting and one around privacy preserving agreements, excuse me. So if we could go to the next slide, please. What you'll see in the other two work groups is this ability for individuals to set a set of criteria, information that they are okay with sharing on a regular basis in a marketplace. A use case that we often talk about is buying a car, as an example. There are a lot of different data points in a purchase of a big ticket item like that. And wouldn't it be interesting if there was a way for people to push out into a marketplace what their desires are and then receive offers back in? And that's basically what intent casting is really meant to do. And a gentleman who is probably one of the top leaders in the customer relationship management segment of information sharing in Henderson leads that group up. At the same time, we have another project that is working on preserving information sharing around the privacy. And that is actually a information sharing agreement goal where individuals can simply check off box and build profiles that then allow that information to flow seamlessly between themselves and an organization, whether it is stagnant or dynamic information. There is an upfront agreement or negotiation around sharing that information and the privacy around it. These projects are incredibly important to the framework because they will build a variety of profiles. And one of the things that we learned from the consent information sharing work group, which we archived and retired through its success, and has now also moved into notice and consent around information sharing, is the incredible complexity that's required in memorializing the use of data and being able to provide that information from those data points back to an individual. And so the personal data use receipt framework is what these different projects will be providing around profiles that support and enable this new capability. And of course, one of the things that we are very much focused on is baking in the interoperability into the framework itself, so that there is not a lot of work that needs to be done from the data ontology, if you will, or the way that data is actually arranged from an interoperability standpoint, thereby making it easier for companies or requesters of information to provide that sharing information or that record of an event happening where information was actually shared. So we're very, very excited about this new group. As I mentioned, we're a bit of an anomaly to other work groups and what they focus on, and that's really based on the broad amount of information sharing
Tim.
that is available today. So
Let's
thank
move
you.
on. I'm sorry.
And just one, thank you, Jim. Good overview on the multiple projects, the work groups coming on. One thing to point out is, in particular, information sharing interoperability work group has very strong participation and interaction with international standards bodies and other organizations working on, for example, decentralized identity. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of interest in the consent management, notice management, receipt structures. So it's one of those very broad identity and personal data industry networks. Dr. Tom Sullivan, are you presenting, or is Jim Craig presenting on health?
I'm presenting. Can you hear me, Andrew?
You're a little faint. If you can bring the microphone closer or speak up a bit, that'd be great.
Okay, I can also speak a little louder too.
A little louder would be great.
All right. Well, I'll do the best I can.
That's better.
Anyway.
That's
better. Okay. I'm not used to yelling, but I guess maybe I'll have to speak. Anyway, so I'm a physician, spent 44 years in practice, and I'm thinking about what's going on right now as I introduce this with COVID and the pandemic. That privacy is so important in healthcare, accuracy of identifying the right patient, and sharing the information. And it seems like privacy and sharing the information are opposed to one another, but it's so important in today's pandemic. Anyway, so during 2020, we finally completed our long discussion that started out, in IDSG that was, supported by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. And we've moved over, transferred the assets to Kantara. So we finally completed our principles and designs, and they're fairly simple. There's only, I think, 9 or 10 principles, and we posted them to the Kantara wiki. We also, getting down to the nitty-gritty, formally supported with the Leadership Council's approval to support the Foster Bill in the United States Congress, which will lift the ban on funding patient identity from the Department of Health and Human Services. And we have to thank Jeremy Grant and quite a few other people who helped us with this. Jeremy was the head of the government sponsor for the NSTIC program back in those days. We also added some new participants. Most importantly, our very great liaison to the Office of the National Coordinator, Carmen Smiley. I don't know if she's on the call or not, but it's been a real help to have somebody who's working daily within that government structure to make sure we're going in the right direction and are appropriate. And then in addition, we also added Martin Smith and Tom Jones. So I think I can see Martin on this call. I'm not sure if Tom is, and then finally, Catherine Shilton, who's been with us for a while. She's been a real star. I have to look at there's some typographical errors in there, but START is a real star, and she's part of the ONC Tiger team. And then finally, we helped Colin do his presentation, small help to Colin for the ONC conference on patient identity, which was done last August. And one of our long-term members, Barry Heeb, he had his own particular presentation at that same conference. And we kept meeting every other Thursday, so that's what we did during the year. And I hope I didn't go over time, Andrew, but that's my presentation.
Nope, that's excellent, Tom. And another incredible contribution to the industry from the Health Information Assurance Work Group lots of recognition of expertise and active participation. So thank you. Next, we have user managed access, Uma.
Oh, listen, could I just mention, I really want to thank Jim Craig because he's been so helpful and we're working with the fire group too. So I meant to say that, and I know Jim is on this call. So thank you again, Jim.
Yes, incredible contributions from Jim as well. Eve, good to see you.
Good to see you all as well. So I'm Eve Mailer. Also on the call is Alec Laws, my vice chair in the UMA WG, which is actually the first work group that was constituted at Kantara. So it's 10 years old. So probably nobody doesn't know what UMA is. So I won't take time to explain what it is in its particulars because we're short of time. But in our long tenure, we've had a number of accomplishments, but in 2020 to date, we've done some, I think kind of exciting things. We've been building some new draft extensions on UMA, which is at 2.0, based on real life deployment experience, which is largely healthcare related, but not exclusively, and influenced by some important real life use cases having to do with some complex trust questions, including some business, legal, technical, BLT sandwich trust issues that we worked on largely last year, actually through our long tenure, but to a large extent, we made some progress last year. We also had some interesting new liaison activity. We've been mentioning decentralized identity. We had some outreach from the Secure Data Store group. I think they're changing their name. And I'm going to speak actually to the covidcreds.org group next week. I'm going to speak to them last week. I'm going to speak to them next week at their request about UMA, about some potential connections there, healthcare use case, obviously. And Alec is actually our new vice chair, relatively new vice chair. He's also been doing the spec work around these new draft extensions because at Identos, his company, they've been doing these extension efforts and he's been bringing it in. And I just want to say thanks to our outgoing vice chair, Maciej Mikulak, who has also been our longtime spec editor as well. And we actually had a formal acknowledgement and thanks to him in our group. Unless there's questions, I'll just say there's a tiny URL you can go to that I put into the chat if anybody wants to go to our homepage with lots of information there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Eve. I encourage you all to go look at the work at UMA. It's incredible and it's influencing authorization discussions globally. John Wonderlich, you got 30 seconds.
Well, as a freshly launched discussion group, we're still in the storming and forming stages. We've had a couple of work group meetings. We now have a editor's draft, draft 2, which is incomplete, but building. And I look forward to being able to have more concrete responses for you and for the Leadership Council in the new year. But things are building well. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. And sorry, I've forgotten Jim Craig. Are you available? Jim's sort of in flight in transit right now, so
I'm here.
Hopefully,
I'm here.
Yeah. Could you give us a quick JJ, if you could mute, that'd be great. Thank you. And Jim, can you give us a couple of quick highlights on the fire work group?
Just a couple of quick things. Important. Been working very closely with Dr. Tom because all of the fire stuff that we're doing, and for those that don't know, the fire whole focus is about identifiers, if you will. It's a federated identifier for resilient ecosystems. And that's really the third level of the federation that we look at and where it's all going to go. And it's all based on federations of identifiers. So we're working on that. We're very focused on the consumer side. We talk about infrastructure, and most of that in the healthcare has been around the institutional side, the physician side, patient care support. All of our engineering is on the consumer side. How do they interact with it? And one of our recent Leadership Council approved was a report, the Mobile Authentication Assurance Statement. And it's a report, it's a part of the benefit ONC that is out there and trying to get feedback because it's called the MAAS, M-A-A-S. report that focuses on the mobile phone, the assurance of the mobile phone, and can you trust the applications that we're going to be seeing and interacting with? And they need to trust it, not the institutions, the individuals. I'll catch more on that later, Andrew. I'll just, that's where we're at.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Please check them out on the website. Colin, I think the work groups have reported.
Yes,
So
thank you.
back
So
to you.
I believe they have, and thank you so much, Leadership Council Working Group chairs and vice chairs for your leadership for your groups this year. It's much appreciated. And of course, from what I'm actually going to talk about, next slide, please, Andrew, also thanking you in advance for your work here. Something that we've sort of kind of been thinking about for a while, but we hadn't had the opportunity to do it, but now we thought was a perfect year to do that, was the Exemplary Contributor Awards. What we have with the working groups, because we have folks that are non-member participants, member participants, basically really rolling up their sleeves, contributing regularly, volunteering in most cases to what they're doing, nearly all cases. So what we really want to do is call those special folks out. And so we asked the Leadership Council Working Group chairs if they had a nomination to put forward. In some cases wasn't appropriate or whatever, but so what we have is the majority of working groups have done that, certainly too early for MDL. It's only merely just started. But what we have here is the notion of having both a badge that the recipient can put in their website or their blog or personal space or whatever, as well as a certificate. So next slide, please. And you'll find these actually on the website. But to make sure that you don't have to flick out of this particular meeting and go and see them there, please just roll on to the next slide, because we're going to show you them here. So first up, we have from the Fire Working Group. This is the one that Jim Craig is leading. And we have Noreen Weisel. And you'll see that Noreen has done some significant work in contributing. She's not only taking some minutes and so on, but she's done some considerable work in preparing presentations and slides and various other contributions and publications that the Fire Working Group have been working on. And she's been representing the Fire Working Group in external meetings, incurring some travel along the way as she does. On the right of the slide there, you'll see Richard Wilshire. This is from Ken Dagg, from the Identity Assurance Working Group, chair there, nominated Richard Wilshire as an exemplary contributor there. And Richard's been instrumental in much of the work we've been doing in the refresh, much of the work we're doing in the developing of the service assessment criteria, at least the editing side of that. Most of the contributions are coming in from a wide spectrum of folks there. So we deeply appreciate that. Next slide, please. The third one we have is from the Health Identity Assurance Working Group, and this has actually been signed off by Jim Craig, but Dr. Tom Sullivan is the chair there. Vice Chair Jim has signed this one off for Catherine Shulton. Catherine's actually, as some of you were aware, is doing a little bit of work on staff through to the end of the year, and we have to congratulate her actually for she's landed a simply fantastic role in Change Healthcare, is it, coming up next year. But meanwhile, we want to take this opportunity while we still have Catherine to thank her so much for the efforts that she's put into the Health Identity Assurance Work Group. She, together with Tom Jones, were instrumental in Kantara's submission to the ONC on the Unique Patient Identifiers call for comments. So great to see that. To the right there is Oscar Santalala from UbiSecure. Oscar has been nominated by the Information Sharing Interoperability Work Group, ISI, by Jim Pascal. And Oscar, for many of you, those who remember that Oscar was instrumental in the work to bring together the consent receipt demonstrations that he was doing with Andrew Hughes and others. Oscar still regularly attends and contributes in the background in many respects, but a huge proponent of Kantara publicly as well. Next slide. And last but certainly not least is Tom Jones, also nominated out of the fire working group, but you can understand that he's actually across, because his interest is in healthcare, he's working across both healthcare, the HIAWG and ISI. Tom has, if you look in the publications, you'll see his name beside MAS, as has already been mentioned by Jim Craig, and involved in many other publications as well. Thank you so much. Congratulations to those 5 inaugural award winners, and a great round of virtual applause to you. And thank you so much. You'll see those on the website, and they're going to be promoted they're going to be promoted tomorrow on social. We will be just making sure that these recipients are happy for their awards to be shown publicly on the website there, and if they're not, we'll take them down. But meanwhile, I want to hand over to President Matt Thompson, who's going to lead you through the work that the board has been doing over the summer and the road ahead for the next 5 years. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thanks, Andrew. So I want to start by saying, first recognizing Alan Foster, who I had the pleasure of, working with, knowing his entire time as being the board president. And, we had a transition over the last few months that is culminating now. Colin and I sent a note of appreciation to Fran, the CEO of ForgeRock, earlier this morning, just to recognize Alan's dedication, his leadership over the past several years, and a lot of the good work that he has started. I'm very proud to pick up and continue. But I felt it'd be remiss to not start by kind of publicly recognizing Alan's great contributions to the organization, and we're glad ForgeRock stays engaged by way of Eve and her work within the UMA working group, which is very critical to the overall organization. I also want to quickly recognize Robin Wilton and his contributions to the organization as he transitions off the board. So I've been the president of the board and very proud to be in that position for the last several months. As Colin indicated, over the summer and through the fall, the board and the Kantara staff, which is an incredibly dedicated and hardworking staff, has been engaged in a series of strategy workshops to help us really kind of look at a few of the things that we're going to present today. And I don't want to present them as completely final or fully complete yet, because it's important that we get the membership's input on this. Because at the end of the day, you're the people that we serve as a board. But what was clear as I came in to the role of the president of the board, and just even as a new board member, was the need for some strategic priorities that the board was working to advance. And we have a very capable board. I already mentioned Alan and Robin, both of whom have stayed engaged through this Strategy 2.0 process. But also Julian, Ken, Eric, Andrew, and as I mentioned, the staff with Colin Ruth and most recently Catherine have spent hours and hours looking at the ecosystem, our role in that, how we create and communicate value to different stakeholder communities that we serve, and also just what we need to do to position ourselves for the future to really grow the impact of the organization. As everyone's well aware, in this organization, we have a big role to play, a lot of potential, a lot of ambition, but very limited resources, and a staff that is stretched super thin, trying to manage multiple organizational entities, and take on a lot. So in that context, I think it's super important, it's critical that the board help us really focus on the most important things and set out on clear priorities that we're working to advance on a daily, monthly basis. And again, as I mentioned, and Colin said at the opening, we are looking to build out board positions. We're actively recruiting for board members right now. It's a terrific opportunity to get engaged in the vision, the mission of the organization, help drive the overall strategic impact of the organization. And my hope is that, one, what we're going to present, which is the output of the work of these several strategy working sessions, one, resonates with you, our members, but also inspires to get people to want to join our working board. And please do either self-nominate or reach out to Colin or myself to discuss kind of your interest or engagement in the board. One other thing that Colin and I will be doing, along with other board members, is reaching out to several members in order to form some focus groups around some of the areas that we're working to build out. As we focus on the global footprint and global impact that we want to have as a global organization. And again, this is at a point now where I think we have something that focus groups can take and respond to, react to, help us modify and improve. But that will be coming up before the end of the year. So please expect to be tapped, many of you, in terms of engaging in these focus groups, and please continue or consider engaging with us so that we get this right and that we're aligned with the broader membership in terms of what we think are the right priorities for the organization. So as part of the strategy process, we kicked off with working on our corporate identity within Kantara, again, which is globally focused. We looked at the existing mission statement, which was kind of void of vision or overarching vision at the time. So we wanted to add a vision statement to that. We wanted to clearly define, our space and look at the stakeholders, that we serve or that our customers or members serve, or the customers of our members. And so, we defined those. You'll see them here in the next slide in terms of how we mapped out the ecosystem in terms of supply and demand. But I want to start here with, the vision around equitable and transparent exchange of identity and personal data for mutual value. We spent a lot of time as a board and with the staff, analyzing the different words we were choosing here, double clicking into each one of them, and making sure that we felt this was broad enough to represent the overarching vision and impact we can have in the ecosystem. In our mission, which we've shortened, I think, quite considerably, is to grow and fulfill the market for trustworthy use of identity and personal data. We looked at our capabilities in supporting, that mission, which is around the innovation, our new standards definition and community incubation, standardization, some new areas we're looking to build out in terms of RFP supporting, really how we're helping drive the market awareness and education, and better support companies that are looking for trustworthy identity and personal data solutions. And also in standardization, expanding the work we're doing around standards mapping. And then with good practice, the assurance certification and again, industry education, which is another area we're looking to build out in the near term. Andrew, next slide.
Next slide.
So we mapped out, really we looked at the different pieces of the ecosystem that we focus on directly. And then the role that Kantara plays in supporting some of these obvious and less obvious connections that are happening in the ecosystem around trusted identity solutions and personal data exchanges. And we mapped this out so that we could really specify, what we see our role in these connections being, and really kind of narrowing our focus in terms of what is the impact that we want to have within each of these different stakeholder communities. And I'm not going to read each of the boxes here, but this kind of builds into the next areas, which are around some of the organizational priorities, board strategy priorities. Andrew, next slide. So as we look at what we're focusing on as an organization, and certainly at a board level, and how we measure that, because again, I want to be very clear to our membership, in terms of, the tangible benefit and impact we're having, and how we're measuring and demonstrating the value that we create through your membership involvement in this ecosystem within Kantara's global efforts. We wanted to kind of narrow the KPIs and be specific about those, so that people felt good about the value that they were helping create and the value that they were realizing as a member organization. So we see a key role in the overall market growth from trust and compliance. We see a key role in cross recognition of federations and long-term interoperability for relying parties through our accreditation program. Next slide. Some of the outcomes we're driving, is really kind of the communication of trustworthy services here, about how we help drive and communicate and promote organizations that are aligned with the principles and the work that's being done within Kantara. We also believe that we have a role to play in helping define excellent end user experiences, and really how the use of these types of services that align with the work that we're doing within Kantara help drive better user outcomes. And then lastly, again, the board really sees an opportunity to help improve kind of the quality of organizations the quality of asks that organizations are making when they're looking for the types of solutions that our member organizations provide, and really help educate relying parties in terms of how to position and request these types of services that our organizations promote. Next slide. And again, we want to look at how Kantara is helping drive that impact in the ecosystem, and do a better job really of quantifying and communicating the work that this organization is doing. We have an incredibly talented number of individuals representing global organizations that are doing very meaningful work in this space, and we want to do a better job of promoting and making visible the impact that our member organizations are having, and the impact that Kantara as a whole is having on the global landscape. So our board has been very focused on how to quantify that, what KPIs that we're going to measure and demonstrate to the whole of the organization. Next slide. And as the president of the board, and in partnership with the board members, I've identified these 5 key strategic priorities that the board is working on, and we are reporting on within the board meetings on a monthly basis. That came out of the strategy review process. But one is really organizational architecture, making sure that we have the right entity alignment. We have several entities, and again, a very limited staff, to say the least, that's overstretched as it is. Organizational architecture in terms of maturing the board's role and building out the board, as well as some medium and long-term staff planning that needs to be put in place to help transition the organization forward. Value prop refinement. I feel a huge sense of responsibility in making sure that we're getting this right for our member organizations, most of whom I expect have needs or expectations within your organization about how you communicate the value that Kantara, your time, resources, money that's invested in participating in Kantara, how that is having a measurable impact. So we're looking to refine the value prop, and this is a big area where we're going to be reaching out to create some of these focus groups across different stakeholder communities. But I feel very committed to getting that one right. We're also looking at establishing a standard sponsorship program as a means of creating some funding around targeted development work. We also are looking at building out an RFP support offering, just to make it, again, easy for organizations that aren't as knowledgeable about what to look for, what to ask for when it comes to the types of solutions that our member organizations are committed to providing. And then also, looking at number 5, which these are not in priority order as I list them here, because I really view the assurance program as our crown jewel, and looking at how we evolve that, protect that, grow it, and monetize it over time to help drive the growth of the overall organization. But we wanted to use this opportunity, this forum, as a way to present kind of the current draft, I will call it, of the board's work over the last few months. But I feel like it's very important to keep the membership updated in terms of what your board is working on, as well as how we're looking to evolve kind of the impact we're having on a global level within the ecosystem. So I know that was a lot, and we are going to distribute these. I don't expect to go word for word here with the broader membership, but I do welcome that kind of feedback offline, as people are able to review and digest it. If you have specific feedback, please send that to Colin and myself, and we'll certainly take that to the board in our December meeting. But wanted to get this out in front of as many members as possible, and this forum created a great opportunity to do that. Colin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Right, great. You hearing me all right? Yes, thank you. Thanks so much, Matt. That was great to give us an overview there. As you say, there is a lot in there. There's a lot packed in there. I'm not surprised. It took several months of work for the board and the workshops to get us to that point. And as you say, we're not finished yet. This is what we're trying to do, is sort of kind of lay out the table, if you like, the stall, but the pieces that go onto the stall are not really set yet, and that's really where we need the membership's input. And as Andrew very rightly put in the chat there, we want to see yourself in the value ecosystem, and that's quite true. As you've been looking through these slides from Matt, we're inviting you to see what role you could play, where you or your organization identifies with specific parts. A lot of the structure, it is a complex organization to work with, because it's really 3 organizations. But quite apart from that, the fact that you've got one very open commons type community and another highly specialized, very targeted assurance program, conformity assessment, certification, and so on the other. It's a real yin yang in a way, but you know that we work them together, you know, because one is leading into an input to the other, and so that's stood us in reasonably good stead along the way. But we really are trying to sharpen that focus, if you like, by bringing out these different criteria, slightly different angle to look at quite a similar landscape that we have. So now's the time, really. We've come to 5 after the hour, and it was the Q&A and open discussion area. I'm really wishing to open the microphone and open the video, please, for those who would, members or you know, Leadership Council chairs, whoever, to have questions. Bring them to the fore. Let's listen to them and see what we can do to help. And it's not a matter so much of Q&A. It's also an open mic discussion. So this is something that everyone should be able to contribute to. So I'm leaving the floor open here. And who's going to go first? Got to be someone, right? I seem to recall that there would have been perhaps some of the chairs, certainly the Leadership Council reps on the board have seen this, perhaps less so the chairs. So is there something there that from Jim or the Jims, perhaps, who could start us off? Looks like
I'll jump in and start something off, because one of the areas listening to Matt that's going to be very critical from the work that we do in the specification side on the fire group is portability of data, portability of identity. And it's one of the things that's still missing in being able to get through this process. You can have the privacy and security, but keep in mind those are one-on-one. What do you do about the consumer and portability of your information, your data on an infrastructure between trust infrastructures? Becomes very challenging and very interesting.
Right. Very challenging and very interesting. And actually, it was on one of the slides there, the notion around the sort of a combination of standards and user experience, and the point around data portability is it's a discipline that has that involves a number of different components. It's quite difficult to do. So yes, appreciating that. Any other comments, Matt, Andrew?
So I've just got, you've heard me say this a couple times during my section, but I really do want to reinforce the fact that Kantara has a very high and strong reputation in other international groups. It's not always obvious when we're working away on our specialization within a work group, and discussing the hard issues and trying to get the words on paper. But at the various ISO working groups that I participate in, namely SC17 for mobile driver's license and SC27 for the broader identity management and information management standards, along with other bodies and consortia and governments, Kantara has at least equal standing. So people in those other groups are looking towards Kantara for our experience and our commentary and our contributions. It's, like I said, it's not obvious, because if you don't have your feet in both sides of the discussion, you don't see it. But at SC27, it's, hey, Colin, what do you guys think about this when Colin's at the meetings? How does the NIST standards and 29115, the ISO standards, how do they cross compare? Where's the gap? How do we move forward? That sort of stuff. And I know with UMA, the whole discussion around authorization frameworks and OAuth 3 and OAuth XYZ and the whole discussions in the ITF have a lot to learn from the UMA discussions over the years and the advancements, because UMA has taken steps in advance of the rest of industry. So now the rest of industry can learn from the discussions that we've had, and they're having good cross discussions and learnings. If there's nothing else,
well, I think
I
Matt,
wouldn't mind hearing. Yeah,
Matt just had
at
a
one
quick
point I'd like to
response,
hear
I think.
from Alec Laws in a few seconds after Matt.
Oh, right. Okay.
'Cause I want to hear what you guys are doing up there with Identus and UMA. So Matt, over to you.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to emphasize. I know I went through those slides relatively fast, and I do hope that the member organizations take time to read through it as I had asked. But we're also trying to make sure that we as we look at the stakeholders, one of the things that Catherine specifically had helped promote is just how we're doing that looking at it across sectors, but also, making sure that we're maintaining kind of our international responsibility as we set out on the stakeholder communities and define the value propositions and other kind of KPIs that we're trying to help demonstrate. So as member organizations provide that feedback, if you have international kind of representation you want to make sure is that shows up in the outcomes that we're marching towards, as well as industry specific or sector specific feedback, please do provide that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Alec?
And I'm putting Alec completely on the spot, totally unexpected. But Alec, I mean, congratulations on becoming vice chair of UMA. And just as an example of a company that discovered Kantara, started to join, and has really leveraged the assets that Kantara has. I mean, it's a great news story. And now I'm watching from afar as you guys transform the conversation. So how's your experience? What are you guys actually doing?
Maybe I'll start with where you started there. Like in 2017, we were trying to find a fit for, respect for privacy for large government deployments, specifically in healthcare, but more for government in general. So that's how we came and found UMA as a standard that really helped us fill a lot of, what we saw as holes in just the IETF stuff, just OAuth, those are technology protocols. So we sort of built our whole company around our UMA authorization server and trying to find a fit for that within healthcare. And now we're imminently deploying an identity and user managed access deployment in Ontario for all Ontario citizens to prove who they are, establish a trusted verified identity, connect that identity to an UMA authorization server so they can manage other resources within Ontario. So like data and APIs that previously couldn't have been made available because there was no trust model through a sort of UMA authorization server or anything like that. Things like your immunization or your lab results that are locked in provincial repositories in Canada needed that verified ID to, make the marriage happen. So we are deploying UMA authorization servers sponsored by the Ontario government in a couple hospitals in Ontario, and helping people establish a trusted ID. So everything that UMA or everything that Kantara does sort of plays into it, from identity assurance frameworks to health ID interoperability to user managed access and authorization. And I mean, we're really excited about it. And a lot of what we do now is try to show governments that there's a space between today and verified credentials and all that really cool technology that's coming, and show them that, UMA does meet all of those same value outcomes. It's the same user control, disintermediation of parties, like you said around IETF wanting to come back. I look at all the new IETF work, and there's just flavors of UMA, almost, right? thought about mapping them all together because they are so aligned, like XYZ and GNAP and UMA. They're just, you know, three different names for the same concept, which is put the user in control so that you can have privacy the way it's intended, I think, right? But,
and one of the things, it's an incredible story, by the way. One of the things that's in the board discussions of strategy, one of the concepts we were discussing was Kantara is sort of the executive branch kind of role, where you have regulators and policy people and people that want to see the world in a different way, but Kantara really produces tools and reports and research and people that can help you get stuff done, right? And that's the magic sauce. And it's so hard to express unless you're in the mix and you're, you know, talking to a government regulator that says, oh, I've heard about this wonderful future identity world where everyone's independent and all this. And good luck trying to build that. But you guys are filling some of the gaps and helping everyone learn along the way. John Wunderlich in the chat asks you, does this fit in with the recently announced Ontario government digital identity initiative? And Christopher Williams, I'm going to call on you after this if time allows.
So John, yes, the people that announced that program, we've been talking to them directly over the past maybe 2-3 years, as long as we've been involved with Kantara here, just trying to sort of, you know, promote those same ideas around you need these digital credentials, you need people in control of their policy. So this identity that we're putting up is somewhat of a pilot to lead into that, to show that it's possible and show how that government policy can meet and match with this sort of user-controlled digital identity type of ecosystem. Yeah.
Thanks,
I'll put that in. No worries.
Okay. Chris Williams, if you're willing, so again, this is not prepared, if there's no one else willing to or able to ask questions, I'm curious because you and I are both in the ISO SE17 Working Group 10 around mobile driver's license standards. And you're now co-leading on the privacy information MDL discussion group. How do you, I mean, what's your experience? Are you able to have different kinds of discussions in a Kantara group than you can have at the ISO group? And I hope you're still listening and willing to talk. If you don't want to talk, that's okay. Hey, but like sorry. What? Because like we talk about completely different things in a completely different way between ISO and Kantara, and you know you're hearing the Kantara story deeper and deeper as every day you spend talking with folks like John and the rest of the crew. How is it adding value to your work on both sides of the divide?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think it's a really different perspective for me, at least in the Kantara aspects of this, particularly around the privacy and identity MDL group here. I know that I have been more of an observer than an active participant in the ISO group, just due to the nature of the various things that we do at Exponent. And I think that for me personally, I find very interesting that even as well developed as the ISO standard is and seems to be published, there are a lot of holes in the standard that just can't be filled, particularly around privacy, because you can't have a diverse set of options and also a well-regulated set of privacy requirements to make everybody happy. And so I really see Kantara as the place to help develop more of those privacy initiatives, because a lot of those will occur less on the technical side and more in policy space. And so whether that is laws and rulemaking of governments or just simply through the use of RFPs and the requirements for purchasing, that's where the states and various issuers will make privacy decisions ultimately. And so I think Kantara has a big role to play there going forward. So that's why I decided to continue on with Kantara as an individual, even though Exponent has no longer continued with the organization because of the end of our contract.
Just to add, so just to help there, that was Exponent was part of the KIPI program, the Kantara Identity and Privacy Incubator, and they received funding from DHS via Rutgers University Cicada program to do that, and along with Glue and Lockstep Technologies, those three organisations came through, and you're right, that finished beginning of last year. Thanks.
Cool, excellent. Thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And Colin, I apologize for hijacking the mic here, but you know.
But you've got questions lined up now.
I got nothing else to do with not being able to travel, right?
Can I ask a question, Andrew?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I know I've gone over this in the past in our health identity assurance work group. I've asked Colin about it. People talk about the executive functions and then the lawmakers and the regulators. But in healthcare, you know, ultimately, as a physician, and you know, part-time health insurance and hospital executives, I always say, well, where's the judiciary in all of this? What recourse does an individual have if they sign up for all this trust framework and everything else, or institution, and then ultimately you find out there's fraud and you or your organization is the victim? Who do you talk to? Now, you know, in the United States, we have the HIPAA privacy rules, but you can't sue within HIPAA. You can't go to court. You have to complain and then see whether or not the Office of Civil Rights, you know, issues a penalty if they find someone who did wrong. You can sue in some state courts, but not all of them. So is there any overall solution that's either national or even international where a person who's the victim of fraud in any of these transactions, you know, where they can get some sort of redress or be heard? Any thoughts about that, or whether or not Kantara can help with that? I'm just saying, where are the judges and the jury?
I have a brief comment on that, but Andrew might have a quick one.
Well, just quickly, I mean, it does depend a little bit on the jurisdiction, the regulatory environment, because in other jurisdictions there are bodies that can take up questions of recourse and damage. In the U.S., as you mentioned, there's less so. There's more direct action, I think, between the individual and the company, perhaps. But I don't know the right to sue and all that. That's sort of the side of the discussion. On the personal data side, I mean, we're seeing, you know, organizations like Consumer Reports. They've got an interesting collection of technology wonks that are dealing with privacy and ratings. And in the firework group, we have you know, a high interest in consumer-oriented recourse and visibility and transparency into mechanisms that companies have. We talk and work with other organizations like the Me2B Alliance, who are trying to come up with, you know, what is good practice between me, the individual consumer, and the business. I'm not really giving an answer because, you know, there is a rule somewhere there. And I don't know.
You're right. I know Colin's going to speak on this, but you're right. It depends on the individual jurisdiction and the facts of the specific case. But anyway, Colin,
yeah,
you know,
good practice publications are tough to get teeth with, right?
And I was
really got to be real action.
That's right. I was just very briefly going to chip in with, it's the thing that UNCITRAL, Working Group for Electronic Commerce, was attempting to do. It hasn't got very far yet. In fact, it's sort of that was kind of where the motivation started with the effectively model law, but in fact it's gone slightly sideways. The US has actually has been trying to put its view across, because it's very Eurocentric in its view right now. Nothing terribly wrong with that, but there's a limit, just simply the vision of the people around the table, unfortunately. And while Kantara will be in a good position to help out there for a range of reasons, they want to keep it with, shall we say, governmental authorities mostly. Thanks. I think John Wunderlich has something to say here.
When I talk about standards as a technical person, I try and avoid talking about specific laws, because A, lawyers jump on my head, and B, a lot of these things cross borders, so there's not a single necessary jurisdictional aspect. So to Christopher's point earlier about policy wonks, you have to write the standards or the reports so that you hear the guidelines. And so on privacy issues, it's individual autonomy, empowerment, and notice and disclosure and consent and all those other things, but leaving a space for what's this for implementers to say, in my jurisdiction, that means X, rather than stating it a priori.
Well, all I can say as a physician is there's a heck of a lot more lawyers in the United States than doctors.
Henry II.
Oh yeah. First of all, let's kill all the lawyers. Got it. Shakespeare.
Okay, I think Colin is preparing to wrap us up. So thank you, everyone. I hope I was able to give a bit of a flavor of what the discussion in work groups is like. Thank you for responding, folks, to my impromptu requests. But yeah, I mean, it's fascinating stuff, and we've got a lot of expertise at the table. Back to you, Colin.
Thank you, Andrew. Indeed, we do have a lot of expertise at the table, and more and more folks are recognizing that around the world. And you'll actually see that play out in 2021. Typically, even though Kantara is a is a US organization, at least from an establishment viewpoint, it's truly international. Still, more than half of its membership is outside of the US, and in fact, much of our input, at least 50% of our input, is from Asia Pac and from Europe. So from that perspective, it's going to remain very much that way. So folks, I do hope that this sort of run through, the year in review, if you like, that often annual general meetings are, and it's not too formal, but there will be all member ballots coming early next year as we reset the organization. Most importantly for you is to the slides will be sent to you. If you've attended this meeting, slides will be on their way to you quite soon. And we'd like you to reflect particularly on President Matt's slide deck there, and give us your input as to what you think Kantara should do, the role that you could play, how you could leverage and expand on the work that's going to be done there. We'd really appreciate that. And finally, I do want to just say a great congratulations to the exemplary contributor awardees, the 5 of you. Thank you so much for your work, and that's the absolute essence of Kantara's community in the way that it operates. So truly appreciated to them, to the working group chairs, to the board, both those outgoing, those remaining on the board, Experian and DigiMe, and the Leadership Council, IDEMIA, and we certainly look forward to new board members from the directors at large and other board members with the restructure that we're going to have. And you're going to find that serving on Kantara's board is going to be a lot easier going forward than it has been in the past. very much open to any corporation. And indeed, it's a working board. So really expect, very much like a working group, that you're going to roll up your sleeves and do some work there. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Great attendance, pretty much held everyone right through an hour and a half. And that's great to see. Any last words from you, Matt Thompson?
No, thanks so much, Ken, Colin, and to our membership. Thank you. Have a great day.
Indeed. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, Colin. Tough, Colin.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks. And recording is off.